everyone. Hey, so today I have a David Wood from Legen Analytics, which is football analytics company. And David, just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Kirill. First of all, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for reaching out. In terms of my person, so my name's David. I work at Legen. As Kirill said, we're a company based in Germany, in Stuttgart. But me personally, I'm from England originally, as you can tell from the way I speak. Basically, I was in England growing up. I studied French and German at university in England, and then about 10 years ago, I moved to Germany and have basically been working in football since then. So first of all, for around 5 years, I was working for a company called SmartOdds. It's a betting consultancy, which some people probably know because the owner is Matthew Benham, who now owns Brentford and Midtjylland. So I was working for the consultancy, analysing football effectively, and through that started working as a video scout for Brentford as well. And that was until around 2019, and then at that point I moved to Legen to work for the company where I am now, and in that time my role was basically developed, and now today we're involved in a lot more projects, producing video games, producing analyses, and my role is effectively to lead that process in the company.
That's really interesting. So tell me a little bit about this video coaching in this football club, right? What have you learned from it that you're applying right now?
What did I learn from what exactly?
Video coaching experience in the club you've mentioned.
And the video scout, yeah.
Yeah, video
At
scout,
Brentford.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a lot. I mean, Brentford, as most people know, it's a very innovative club in many ways, but particularly the scouting processes are quite advanced. I think other clubs are catching on now. There are other good examples like Brighton, which are very data-driven. But back then, when I was working there as a video scout, it was still something which only a few clubs were doing. And
Okay.
I think one of the things I learnt probably is that I think in scouting in particular in football, a lot of people talk about data and how important data is, and of course that's true, but I think a lot of it is actually just having good processes in place. And if you have a clear process in place, a clear structure where everyone knows what they're doing and where the processes are followed, then you can achieve a lot, because there are a lot of examples of football clubs where it's complete chaos. So you can achieve quite a big advantage in football just by staying calm and following a clear process. And I think the way Brentford worked back then and still work now in their scouting is a good example of that, because they follow a clear process in terms of scouting players. They're not swayed by media opinion or swayed by certain trends. They just follow their thing, and then I think a lot of clubs could learn from that.
Okay, yeah. If we're gonna transition a little bit to to Legen Analytics and being head of Legen Analytics, tell us what you do now.
So basically, first of all, Legen as a company, for people who don't know what we do, we're a company based in Stuttgart. We have two main divisions of the company. So there's entertainment, that's one part, where we primarily produce live streams of football matches. We do goal shows, highlight clips, social media. And then there's the other division called analytics. That's where I work. And we focus primarily on three areas. So one is tactical video production. So that means not the usual TV streams that you get, but tactical videos where you see all the players in the picture. That's one aspect. The second one is collecting event data. So goals, shots, corners, free kicks, and so on. We collect the data from the events, from the matches with our analysis team. And then the third aspect, we put that data on our analysis platform. So the second area, obviously, because I work there, is the one I can talk most about. In terms of the analytics area, the main goal is to provide a platform for the clubs in the leagues, also for the federations, where you can see all the videos, all the data in one place. And the idea is to help coaches, analysts and scouts in their day-to-day work to do it more effectively and more time efficiently, because time is always everything in football. So essentially seeing how they can do their work in the most efficient way possible.
You mentioned that in football clubs, you've seen like a lot of clubs being chaotic, right? A lot of, things going on. And like right now what you're doing, you're providing clubs with the tools, with instruments to be more efficient. right?
Yeah, so it depends. So one example I would say is in terms of, again, scouting processes, because you have clubs, there are still a lot of them who are very agent run, I would say, where maybe the club has a strong relationship with a certain agency, or they work primarily with agents in terms of getting recommendations on players. And I think agents still play their part. Of course, you need relationships with player agents and it's good to get the recommendations. However, I think a better approach is to filter the players and find the players yourself and then use the agents more as an assistance in that process. So I think with platforms like what we provide, there are obviously other companies who do it too. The idea is to, in your scouting processes or also analysis processes, just to do it in a more objective way where you have clear data on a player and you have the video material on a player and you can make a clear objective assessment, and where you're not too swayed by this agent who's recommending this particular player. And basically being able to find more accurate decisions, less emotional. Emotion plays a part, but I'd say it should play a little part at the end after you've gone through a proper process first.
If we will say about inefficiency and how the question I wanted to ask, like you mentioned, a lot of clubs are inefficient, chaotic. Do you guys, I know it's tough scene, but do you provide any recommendations on how it is actually better to use your tools and helping them, to not be that chaotic, like you said, but following the process?
Yeah, generally it's something we try to do. So the way I would say it is we don't want to tell the club, obviously, who are the right players or how they should play, but what we do want to do is to deliver certain data and functionality so that they can then make those decisions better themselves. So, of course, there are different ways of going about it. If we stick with the example of scouting again, you could, and if you're looking for, I don't know, your next goal scorer who's going to score 20 goals in a season, then one fairly simple way would be to see which players scored the most goals in the last season. Probably a more developed way would be to see which players last season had higher expected goals ratings, which ones are playing in underrated leagues, undervalued leagues, which players maybe performed very well last season, had some bad luck, and actually probably you can expect in the next season they'll revert back to the mean, and then you could essentially get a undervalued striker just because he's had one bad season, where you can actually have a good idea that he'll perform quite well the next season. So that's just one example, but I think it's about looking at the data and looking for things that aren't quite so obvious. Yeah, and another aspect I would say, and that's why, again, I don't want to advertise the company too much, but basically one of the reasons why I think it's important that companies like us or other companies are producing video of these leagues and tactical video is, I think it's important when you're making a decision to buy a certain player that you see as much video time of that player as possible. Because in football there's so much variation, there are so many factors that can influence a player's performance. If you go to 2 or 3 live games of that player, maybe he'll play really well and then maybe he's terrible in the next 10 games, or the other way around. But if you watch 10, 15, 20 full games on video of that player, then you have a much better chance of getting to the actual truth of his level. You eliminate the variance in a better way, and then you can still have live scouting at the end. But I think through the video and through watching lots of video of the player, through filtering his actions during the game, you have a better chance of making a good decision when signing a player. Obviously at the lower levels the amounts of money involved are smaller, but particularly at the higher levels, if you're spending millions of euros on a player, then it's worth investing a little bit more time to get the decision right, at least to avoid the big mistakes.
True, yeah. So you're serving, leagues that most big data providers overlook, right? And my question to you is that what are the most, insights have you gained working with these leagues, clubs on the levels before the, the first ones? And what are the insights you learned from there?
So I think you really learn how diverse football clubs are, how diverse the ways of working are. So just to give some context, we cover various leagues, but one good example would be in Germany you have the regional league. That's the 4th tier of German football. It's split into 5 divisions, and in the 4th tier of German football you have some second teams of the Bundesliga, under 23, under 21. Of course, they have very professional structures. Then you have some big names, so big clubs who used to be higher who have fallen down but are quite ambitious. And then you have some clubs who are quite small, maybe part-time, and maybe they're just in the regional league for 1 or 2 seasons. And for us, something that's important is, of course, we want to provide a service that is actually useful for the clubs and that they can actually use in their day-to-day workflow. So on the one hand, we want to provide videos and data for the big professional clubs where they already have a lot of manpower, but then there are also the smaller clubs where maybe the coach has another full-time job at the bank during the week, or no idea, he can have any other job during the week, and then maybe the club doesn't have a full-time analyst and they just have the coach doing it on the side, and in his situation or her situation there's no time to code or tag every game themselves. There's no time to prepare everything. So in that case, that's the reason why things like event data for videos is useful, because the coach can already see all the goals, all the shots, all the set pieces of his team, of the next opponent, prepared already, and then essentially that work that takes many hours is done for you, and then you can just focus on trying to interpret the data and then bringing that into the next team talk or the preparation for the next games. I think, to go back to the original question, yeah, you just learn to be flexible in terms of the different needs of clubs. It's not enough to just provide one service to fit everyone. You need to be flexible and know what the clubs actually need. Because if you provide a product, if you provide a platform where it just doesn't fit in their workflow, then basically there's no benefit for anyone. So that's how I would sum it up.
Okay, yeah, being flexible, between the needs of different clubs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in this season, I'm interested, how many games do you cover?
It's around 7,000 to 8,000 at the moment.
7 to 8.
Yeah, because it's Germany, Austria, and Spain are the main countries at the moment.
So this is the 3 leagues, right? And then what are the typical, how quickly do you get the data to these teams?
Again, a little bit of variation depending on what analysis template we use. We have a simple one, we have a more complex one, but generally we aim to deliver the data between 8 and 24 hours after the match. So again, it seems maybe ambitious, but actually it's pretty much necessary, because in many cases, if you have a game on a Saturday afternoon, then the analyst already wants to prepare the overview of that game on the Sunday morning, and if our data that we prepare is not ready, then he's already lost the window, and then maybe his coach is not happy with him, and so on and so forth. Yeah, we aim for quick delivery times, and we've built a system over the years which enables that by having analysts in different time zones. So we have analysts in Spain, which is obviously a similar time zone to Germany, but we have analysts in South America as well. And that means that if we have a game in Germany where the video is ready at 10 in the evening, then it's a bit late for someone in Europe to be working. Most people don't want to do an analysis at that time, but in South America it's still during the working day. So effectively we can have our analysts in South America working through their day, working through the German night, and then the analysis is ready in the morning for the clubs. So it needs to be well planned. There needs to be a clear process in place to make sure you keep those delivery times. But it's pretty essential, particularly for coaches and analysts. There are other aspects like scouting where it's not so time critical. Like if you're scouting a player, generally you look at games weeks, months ago. But in particular for analysing your game or preparing for the next game, you really don't have much time. And in football, everyone's under time pressure, so we try to deliver it quickly, still with good quality, but deliver it quickly, and then they can use it for their work effectively.
Well, yeah, I'm 100% with you on this. I know the challenge. I'm in the same, business. My question to you is that, what have you learned when, building a global workforce, covering 8,000 games, right? And doing it under the time pressure. So what you have learned, while doing this?
So I would say probably the most important thing which is then the basis for everything, is the people you employ. So I would say that a large amount of energy goes into the recruitment process of our analysts because, of course, there are a lot of people who are passionate about football and want to do football analysis, but to actually deliver the analyses with consistent quality over a long period of time, not everyone can do that. So I think you need to be careful, first of all, in the recruitment process to filter the best candidates, to interview them, to do tests to see if they are capable of doing the work, because in our case the analyses that the analysts do, of course some things are quite simple, like was the corner from the left or the right. Most people can do that, but some other aspects are more complex, like what was the tactical situation before this particular shot. So a certain level of football understanding experience is necessary. I'd say probably the main thing is the recruitment process, but then the second thing is having a structure in place where every analyst and also every coordinator of the analysts knows exactly what their tasks are at a given time. So we have different working shifts through the weekend. Everyone knows which games need to be assigned, which games need to be checked. Basically, you just need to plan it well. You need to make sure you have reliable people working. And another aspect, which is also, of course, very important, is the quality assurance. So that means that, of course, we're still talking about people and mistakes can happen. So that means that we need to have a rigorous process of how the analyses are checked. So we check for, is the factual data correct, the lineups, the cards and so on, were the goals tagged correctly, were set pieces tagged correctly and so on. And then if we identify errors, that we correct them and that the analysts receive feedback. So I think those regular feedback loops with the analysts are also important to make sure that if some errors are happening, that they're addressed quickly, and that basically the work that's delivered by the analysis team is a consistent quality, because that's one other factor which is important, and that's the football clubs working with our data. Of course, the data needs to be good quality, but it also needs to be consistent. So if you have 10 different people, maybe they all see football in a slightly different way. So that means you need to make sure you have clear guidelines of how should be tagged according to our system, because of course no one will always agree 100% with everything, but it's more useful for the clubs to know it's always done in a consistent way, because then they know there's data consistency and they can compare different leagues and different games. If it was done according to everyone's footballing understanding, then you just have at the end...
Yeah, you mentioned that, right, the quality is really important, the quality aspect of the work, consistency of the data, planning, everything. So a lot of, planning work out there. But, the leaks you are doing, like we've talked before the podcast, you mentioned that sometimes the quality is not best over there. The quality of the video, I mean. And how do you resolve this issue when you're trying to deliver the best possible data, but on the other side, the input is not the best one?
Yeah. No, it's a good point, because of course if you're talking about the top leagues, then there's no problem at all. You have 4K cameras everywhere, so you can identify every player with ease. In our case, there are some leagues we film, like for example the third league in Germany or the first women's league, where the videos are very good and there's no issue. But there are other leagues where, for example, youth level or some smaller regional league stadiums where you're not very high up, you're only filming from a few meters high, and maybe the floodlights aren't the best, or maybe the color combinations on the shirts are not so easy. You really get some wild color combinations, some interesting choices where, I don't know, you have light red numbers on a red shirt, things like that. And yeah, those are all interesting challenges to deal with. So in that case, I think what you basically need to do is to consider how to divide the tasks up to ensure the best data. I'd say even when the video is not perfect, there are some things you can still always identify quite easily. You can still see if it's a shot, you can see where the shot went, and you can see the tactical actions happening on the pitch. But one thing which is not so easy is identifying the players. Therefore, something which often helps is to divide the analyses in a way where one person basically tags the events, and then another person adds the player labels, because that way there's one person whose dedicated job is just identifying the players. So at the start, identifying which players are in which position, what the formations are. And when you do that, and then you go through the tags and add all the player labels, you don't always need to be able to see the kit number on the shirt. Sometimes they're at the other side of the pitch and there's no chance. But you don't always need to see it, because if you watch a game and you follow the players closely, then at some point you know which player is playing in which position, you know which colour the shoes are, what colour hair they have, and the gait, the way they run. Every player runs in a slightly different way. So you just combine that information to be able to know who that player is, and then through things like that there are ways of compensating the video not being perfect. In our case, in most competitions we analyse, we also produce the videos ourselves, but of course, we're talking about lower leagues, so there are some leagues where we can have a high tripod to have a higher position, but there are some leagues where that's not possible. Maybe in the stadium there's no room for it, and of course these are also lower leagues, so we film with good cameras, but it's not okay level like in the top league. So it's a mix of trying to get the best video quality you can, but then also arranging the workflow so that even if the video is not perfect, you can still get good data. There are ways around it, you just need to be more creative. I guess it forces creativity when you're having these solutions.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I think, where the place where your understanding of the game is actually being tested, because you're trying to figure out which player, like you said, by the color of his hair, or how he runs, maybe the position he plays, right? And combining all of that, you could predict at some level of accuracy that those players, this is the player who did the event.
Yeah, exactly. So in most cases that's sufficient, and from that information you know which player did the shot or which player had the assist or hit the cross and so on. But of course sometimes you still don't know, so sometimes you just have to zoom in on the video. So it's little things like adding a zoom function in the video to see the number. Or the best scenario is, of course, if a goal is scored, because if a goal is scored then we zoom in on the celebration and then you see all the numbers of the players. So that's like a dream for an analyst, if a goal has been scored and then you zoom in and see the numbers.
The goal is being scored, you mean?
Yeah, because we zoom in on the celebration, because also for highlight clips and so on, it's good to see the celebration in the moment. And those are also little shortcuts for seeing the numbers better.
Okay, I got you. And you mentioned that you're also producing videos for these teams.
So we produce, again, it depends on the league, but most of the leagues we cover, we do tactical videos, so it means that we have a camcorder at the game. Our filmer is recording the pitch from a wide perspective, so always all 20 outfield players are in the picture, and then the relevant goalkeeper. So if the ball is in the attacking third, then that goalkeeper in that goal is shown, and then all the outfield players. So that way you have a good wide tactical perspective. That's always important from an analytical point of view, because you want to know where the defensive lines are of the two teams and how big the spaces are between all the players. But of course, when you have a tactical perspective, you're not zoomed in, so you can't see close up the players so well. So that's why, as I said, that has those challenges for collecting the data. But one thing we introduced this summer, which has just gone, is that there are now competitions where we have one filmer doing the tactical video and also one filmer doing a TV video. So that means that the second filmer does a zoomed in production, so like you would see on TV, and that's actually the ideal combination, because that way you get the tactical view, which is useful from an analysis perspective. You also get the TV view, which is good for the fans and also good in terms of identifying more close up what the players are doing. So one good example is set piece situations, like if you have a corner kick, then in a tactical perspective you also want to see the players who are standing deep. But if you stay at that view the whole time, then you can't see so well what's happening in the penalty area. So for a corner situation, it's perfect to have both, because you can see the tactical view, how deep the players are standing, or maybe how many strikers the defending team left up the pitch. But then you also have the TV view to see in detail what the players in the box are doing. And that's useful from an analytical perspective, a scouting perspective, also a referee's perspective, because there are also referees and referee observers who use our videos because they want to assess the referee's performance. And if you want to see who is pulling whose shirt in the box, you need a zoomed in view, effectively. So we've started doing that in some leagues where we have both videos combined.
Okay, and if we, let's summarize, by the last question, if we would take all of your experience, right, working with a football club, working with Legen Analytics, right now, what would you say the most important data metric that coaches use, except goals, of course, assists, we do not talk about these things.
So I know it's a bit of an obvious answer, but I say it because I think it's true. I think it's expected goals. And of course there are variations of expected goals as well. But I think it's basically, I learned this from my time at SmartOdds and also Brentford. Of course it depends on the system you use, but if you have a good expected goal system, it's simply the best way of predicting the long-term performance of a football team. If you're a coach or an analyst and you want to know if you're performing well, if you're going to sustain that performance, then actually whether you win 2-0 or 3-0 or 1-0 is actually not so relevant. More relevant is what your XG advantage in that game was. Because football is a sport where it's not like some other sports where there's a certain level of predictability to it. Football is such a chaotic, dynamic game with so many moving parts and so many players that luck plays a massive role in football. So it's something which I think intuitively, and myself, I went through this as well, intuitively it's sometimes hard to accept or understand how much role randomness or luck plays in football, but it's so random that a lot of the ways that goals happen is also based on randomness. You might have a deflection here, you need to be lucky whether the goalkeeper of the other team is having a good day or a bad day. You have wind, you have bad pitches, there are so many different conditions which in a way are out of your control, which influence whether goals are scored. That the old method that people used to use to measure how a team is playing by looking at the score, of course it's still extremely relevant what the actual score is at the end of the game, because that decides whether you get promoted or relegated. But it's much more relevant and useful to know how many chances and what quality of chances you're creating, because in the conversion of the chances themselves there's a lot more randomness than you would think. And if you look at data of players as well, it's also interesting because there are certain players like Lionel Messi would be an example where Messi is of course a better than average finisher, like his finishing quality is better than average. However, the thing that really makes him stand out is the number of good chances he creates for himself. So he finishes the chances better, but the bigger difference maker is the fact that he gets into the positions to have the chances. Either his movement is good, or of course in Messi's case he just dribbles himself into the position. You see that again and again with players. Heung-min Son actually is another interesting example. Heung-min Son is definitely a better than average finisher. However, he's also a player who is very good at getting into certain positions. Again, it's something which is not so intuitive, but if you look at the data, that's really the thing that marks out the great goal scorers from the not so good goal scorers. It's getting the chances in the first place. So that's why, to go back to what I mentioned previously, if you're looking for a good striker, I would highly recommend, you don't really need to care that much about how many goals the striker actually scored in the last few seasons. You should look at what the expected goals values were, because in the big majority of cases, players who get good chances, even if they didn't finish them before, they will revert to the mean. They will start converting those chances, and of course you can also train the finishing quality, but the thing which is harder to train is getting the chances in the first place. So yeah, that's my take on that.
Do you give any recommendations to the teams sometimes when they're looking for goal scorer, and you could go, look, you don't need to look at how many goals he scored last season?
Yeah, I try not. I tend to give more general guidelines of where to look, because I also, of course, in my role, and it's the same for my colleagues, we try to stay objective, because there are different clubs who are our customers, who we work with, and so maybe I could see the data of one player and I think, okay, he's interesting, but if I recommend that player to another one, maybe the original club is not so happy. So it's I try to stay fairly neutral, but I just give pointers and guidelines. where the clubs could look.
All right, yeah, got you, David. So let me walk you through a blitz at the end. So first question would be, what is your favorite sport?
Football, by a distance.
Okay, easy. The favorite athlete of all time?
How quick do my answers need to be? That's a tricky one. I would say actually my favorite athlete would actually be a tennis player, David Ferrer.
Okay.
I don't know why he came to my mind, but he always stood out to me because of his work rate. Like, he had talent, but he just worked unbelievably hard to be a professional tennis player and managed to get the ball back from ridiculous situations. So, yeah, David Ferrer, I would say.
Okay, what is the favorite part of your job?
I would say it's when I have meetings with football clubs that we work with who, up to that point, had not worked so much with the data or maybe weren't so involved in that process, and then I have the chance to visit them, I present what's possible, and basically I see the gratitude in their eyes. I see how grateful they are for me taking the time, showing them what they can do, and yeah, it just opens a new world of opportunities sometimes. So I'd say the smaller football clubs who have not yet gone really into that era of data and analysis at a high level, if I can then show them what's possible and get in their feedback, those are the nicest moments.
Wow, like something, showing something new to a kid or something like that.
Yeah, this is comparable. Yeah.
You toy. All right. Favorite is awesome, but what is the worst part of your job?
The worst part is when something goes wrong, and
Okay.
which of course it can happen. Like, everyone makes mistakes. If one of our videos is not so good, if there's some technical error, if something goes wrong, and then of course the club is unhappy, they need the work to be good to do their work properly. So yeah, I'd say times when it's not optimal, and then basically you haven't been able to deliver the quality that you wanted to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to make it so that doesn't happen too often if possible.
Okay, I got you. And the last one, if there is any advice you would like to give to our listeners, like let's say sport tech people, young people who want to get in sport tech, or overall any thoughts that we haven't covered with you but you just love to share?
I would say in general, particularly if you're starting out, if you're looking for your first job, I would say you shouldn't look too closely at getting the best job at the biggest company with the biggest salary and so on. I think you should look more closely at the job where you're going to learn the most, because people can take away your position or people can take away your salary, whatever, later, but you can never take away the knowledge you've built. So I think you should focus on finding a company or a club or a business where you have the chance to learn and do lots of different things, because by learning those different things, by doing them, that's the way where you make yourself as a person more valuable for the long term. I'd say you need to take a long-term view. The first step is learning, improving your capabilities, and then the rest will come automatically.
Wow, yeah, so true, so true. I've been thinking about this last couple of days, like everything that is outside that's not mine, they could take my job, my salary, my business, anything, but they could not take me from myself, right?
No, exactly. And I think you yourself as a person, you will always remain. Every person has a unique mix of knowledge and experience. Like, no one sees the world exactly how I do, no one sees it exactly how you do. Everyone is unique, and you need to basically do what you can to develop those unique experiences and skills that you have, because no one else will have those. And I know people are maybe afraid of the whole era of AI and what that means for jobs and so on, but of course AI is going to have a massive role, but it's always going to be important, the actual people who are working with AI, who are using it. And if you develop yourself as a person, that you have a wide range of skills, wide range of experiences, then you're setting yourself up well to cope with whatever happens in the future.
Yes, if you just keep learning, keep living your life through your principles and foundations, I mean, nothing could happen bad to you. I mean, you'll have dark moments, but still, if you're learning and growing, agree on that 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, David. So thank you for being on the podcast. I really love the conversation. I really loved, the data collection side. I really loved, to learn a little bit more about your company. So where can everyone follow your work?
So if you want to go to the website, it's legen.football.
Mm-hmm.
It's an unusual ending to the website. .football you don't see so often, but it's legen.football, and we're also on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and so on. So Legen, Ligen. It's the German word for leagues. So yeah, that's how to find us.
Okay, David, thank you so much. It was great to have you.
Thank you. You too. It was a pleasure.